From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Emike Omoli. Welcome to the program. Brazil has lost some of its most precious historical artifacts after a huge fire swept through the National Museum. Firefighters battled through the night to control the blaze in the Boa Vista neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro. The museum had just celebrated its 200th anniversary. Its collection includes almost 20 million items. The fire broke out after closing time and there are no reports of injuries.
We worked here on education with different groups from around the world. It's a loss. I'm without words.
It's a loss for the world. This can never be recovered for the people, for the building. There is no way to get it back. Thankfully, no one died, but the loss can never be recovered.
Well, Brazil's National Museum is housed in the old imperial palace of Dom Pedro I. Brazil's independence was signed there in 1822. Among its exhibits are skeletons and reconstructions of Brazil's oldest dinosaurs, like this petrosaur, and the fossilized skull of Lucia, the oldest female remains found in the Americas, dating back 11,000 years. It is feared that these, along with most of the museum's items, have been lost in the fire. The National Museum belongs to Rio's Federal University and, like many of Brazil's educational institutions, it has suffered severe financial constraints in recent years. Since 2013, its total budget was cut by more than half. Maintenance work was left undone and visitor numbers have fallen drastically. The head of Rio's fire brigade says controlling the blaze was impeded by a lack of water in the fire hydrants. Water had to eventually be drawn from a lake. The president of Argentina, Mauricio Macri, is expected to announce more austerity measures in just a few minutes. They are likely to include closing up to 10 ministries. The announcements come after last week's dramatic collapse of the currency. The Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Labor will disappear in this government reshaping. The peso recovered marginally on Friday, but it lost 34% of its value against the US dollar in the month of August alone. And over 500 state workers from the agro-industrial sector have been fired. Workers are protesting against the layoffs by camping outside the Ministry of Agro-Industry's headquarters.
The layoffs are especially tough in economic-deprived provinces. Units will be dismantled in the Patagonia and also in different provinces across the northeast region of the country. With all the anguish and sadness of the 560 layoffs are confirmed, our Workers' Assembly ratifies our occupation in the ministry.
Well, our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Sabrina Roth, brings us more.
Tensions and uncertainty continues in Argentina after the peso plummeted in relation to the dollar, reaching 42 pesos per dollar. This means a hike of 18% in just a week. The central bank set an interest rate of 60%, one of the highest in the world. This means accessing credits is even more expensive now. During the weekend, President Mauricio Macri has held meetings with different political parties and high officials, along with his finance minister, Nicolás Duhovny. It is expected that the government announces the new economic measures this Monday. It was reported over the weekend that authorities were planning an adjustment on the public spending and also a reshaping of the government. Different ministries could be eliminated, but official information has yet to be disclosed. A press conference is scheduled for Monday, headed by the Chief of the Cabinet of Ministries, Marcos Peña, and Minister Nicolás Duhovny. The finance minister will travel to Washington soon after to meet with the Chief of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde. Their meeting will focus on defending the new austerity policies aimed at adjusting $100,000 million. But critics say this only means more suffering for the people.
Sabrina Roth reporting there. Well, still in Argentina, former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner will appear in court again in a few hours. Fernández will testify about an alleged corruption network during her term. So far, 12 businessmen and high-ranking officials linked to the case have been arrested. Fernández denies any wrongdoing. She also says this is a campaign of political persecution against her. Mexico's president-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador will meet relatives of the 43 disappeared students from the Ayotzinapa on September 26th. The families want a commission to investigate their disappearance.
I was told they wanted to meet with me, so I said yes, that I will meet with them. I booked a date to talk to them.
Well, social movements in Mexico mobilized over the weekend to reject the sixth and final annual report by the Enrique Peña Nieto administration. The demonstration ended outside the same parliament building where a new left-wing majority legislature has been sworn in.
Teachers from the Education Workers Union took to the streets of Mexico City to condemn once again President Peña Nieto's education reform. As the outgoing government delivered its last annual report, they called on President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador to include the unions in preparing a new kind of education.
We want to tell Peña Nieto that his education reform has failed. In spite of his attempts to remove our rights and our job security, it has failed.
With Mexico's 64th Congress beginning its work, social movements outside drew attention to the dire state of the public health service.
They admit us to hospital in chairs, on the floor. There are no medicines, no gas. Once there was no machine to check my heart.
Inside the Congress, the new session was underway. For the first time, there is a left-wing majority in Parliament, led by Morena and its ally, the Party of Labor.
I think that on July 1st, Mexicans punished the PRE and Peña Nieto for a series of failures in investigations against corruption over the president's White House, Odebrecht, and the terrible case of the 43 disappeared Ayotzinapa students.
It is the first time that the people are fully represented in this sovereign body. 308 members of the coalition, almost two-thirds together with the new president. We will make history. It's a big responsibility.
They will have their work cut out. They'll need to review the raft of neoliberal reforms passed by the previous Congress, where the PRI, now reduced to the third party in Congress, approved changes to the Constitution in relation to energy, education and the banks. They will also have to create a new Ministry of Public Security and approve a new Attorney General.
People are protesting in Guatemala after President Jimmy Morales expelled the International Commission Against Impunity. We have more details in this report.
People gather once again in the central square of Guatemala City to protest against President Jimmy Morales. This time, they are rejecting the president's decision to expel the International Commission Against Impunity from the country. Just before, this UN mission had requested Morales loses his immunity in order to investigate him. He is accused of illegal campaign financing.
His decision is proving once again he is corrupt and a thief. If he wants the International Commission Against Impunity out, it's because he's afraid. He's afraid of what the investigation has found so far.
The country is currently facing a new political crisis. Demonstrators said this has been fueled by Morales' rejection to be fully investigated. They also denounced the government used military personnel to announce the expulsion. They say they remember the dictatorship.
We are showing him we are not afraid of the military. They will not intimidate us. The president can send all the military personnel he wants. We will remain here demanding he leaves.
The Constitutional Court has received a request from the human rights prosecutor to prevent the president from using the military during this time.
We are asking the Constitutional Court to forbid President Morales to mobilize the military. This request also includes the Ministry of Government and the police.
People have called for new protests against President Jimmy Morales. Meanwhile, the Constitutional Court will have to decide on another legal action to prevent the International Commission Against Impunity to leave the country.
Well, Sweden's Foreign Minister Margot Wallström says her country will do everything to ensure the UN mission remains in the country. Wallström says the decision made by President Jimmy Morales is very worrying as the Commission aims to guarantee the rule of law. Guatemala has tried to expel the Swedish ambassador since May after he criticized corruption in the country. Maria Rosales has more from Guatemala City.
Two important events are expected this week that will determine the future of Guatemala. First, the Constitutional Court must come to a decision on whether to support President Jimmy Morales' decision to expel the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala. This leaves in doubt whether Commissioner Iván Velázquez could stay in the country after September 18, or if he will be removed. And second, the Investigative Committee for President Jimmy Morales must set a timetable for their investigation and start determining witnesses.
Mario Rosales reporting there. We'll take a short break now. Join us in a few moments.
Me gustaría tener un mundo mucho más inclusivo para todos.
没有贫穷.
Στην ανθρωπότητα θα ήθελα να δω παραπάνω αγάπη, αγνότητα, πολιτισμό και επαφή με τη φύση.
Que el ser humano despierte su conciencia.
I want humanity to see itself as one humanity.
We are the people, a space, a voice. We are Telesur without borders.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. Thousands of supporters of the Nicaraguan government have marched in the capital, Managua. The rally came a day after the United Nations Human Rights Mission left the country. The government says everything has returned to normal after 5 months of political crisis. Anti-government demonstrators also marched in the city. 2 people were injured when cars were burned and different roads blocked. Maria Jose Diaz has more from Managua.
Thousands of Nicaraguans took to the streets of Managua on Saturday as a show of support for families who have lost loved ones in the violence that has marred the country since April. Nicaraguan and FSLN flags covered the streets. Marchers held the pictures of those who have lost their lives this year. Marchers were calling for peace on the streets and justice for the hundreds of victims of the opposition violence, as well as for the damage caused all over the country. Marches like this took place all over the country in support of the Sandinista Front for National Liberation. Opposition members also held marches against the government, but they turned violent as some marchers set fire to a police car and attacked security officials. There were also hooded people holding rifles, rocket launchers and Molotov cocktails riding around in pickup trucks with no license plates. The National Police has said they are investigating the people behind this violent march. They say they will use all their resources to serve justice and protect lives of Nicaraguans.
Maria Jose Diaz reporting there. And the Nicaraguan police released an official statement condemning the attack on police officers and armed and hooded men. According to the statement, 2 policemen were attacked on the highway outside Masaya. One of them sustained serious injuries. The attackers also set fire to the police truck. Costa Ricans have protested against the arrival of Nicaraguans who are fleeing violence in their country. This is the 2nd march against Nicaraguans in as many weeks. Hundreds marched on San Jose on Sunday, saying they do not want Nicaraguan migrants coming into the country. They say there are not enough jobs for those arriving.
So they're allowing people to enter when we have a high unemployment rate? It's common sense. If we have a high unemployment rate, then why are thousands of people coming in and there's no source of work? What's going to happen to these thousands of people? They will commit crimes and create social chaos.
Thousands of people were murdered and disappeared in Peru between 1980 and 2000. Now their relatives are remembering and honoring them with a memorial site.
They only have this space called El Ojo que Llora, or the eye that cries, to remember their murdered and disappeared relatives by subversives or the military between 1980 and 2000. Out of the more than 21,000 missing Peruvians, the prosecutor's office only found about 3,000 bodies, of which less than half were identified and returned to their families.
We ask the armed forces to be decent and speak. They were their countrymen who they disappeared. So this is why we ask in the name of their families, the mothers, the brothers, the parents, to tell us what happened to them. Did they throw them in the river? Did they burn them? We just want to know.
Another pending issue is the collective reparation for the affected communities because of the violence. 15 years ago, the Truth Commission recommended assisting with productive social programs and basic services. But out of 5,700 registered communities, only 46% have received partial assistance, according to the Ministry of Justice.
We still have a long way to go with the issue of reparations. We know that we do, and that we have not fulfilled many of the expectations of the people who have suffered from the violence. However, the state's commitment is to advance and to attend to the most people possible.
The lack of a budget for the reparation programs and the propaganda campaigns of Fujimorismo are, according to experts, the reason for the limited progress for justice and reparation for hundreds of thousands of affected people, while the little that is done is due to pressure from victims' associations and human rights associations.
It is only because there are these organizations that permanently pressurize the government to resolve this and find justice. But we are always saying that the most affected have been ignored. The excluded, the poor, and the political parties do not have this in their agenda.
According to human rights organizations, out of the more than 5,000 women victims of sexual violence during the internal violence, only 3 people have been punished, while the thousands of women sterilized by force by the Fujimori dictatorship have been waiting 20 years for justice.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says the failed refinery at state-owned oil company Petrochin could be sold. The union gets the first preference. He made the announcement in a national address ahead of its closure, but the Prime Minister isn't happy with the union. He alleges that they had declined his invitation to sit on the board of Petrochin to help with its restructuring. He also accused them of unnecessary work stoppages, which hampered productivity.
Notwithstanding its profitability in the distant past, the company and the unions understood that Petrochin must become competitive within the principle of international benchmarks to be profitable. Petrochin's business model has become obsolete and uncompetitive, and its operating practices are inefficient. The company was nowhere in line with global industry standards and best practice. In fact, the company's operations are identified as being among the most inefficient in the world.
This week marks 1 year since Hurricane Irma devastated the Caribbean. In St. Martin and St. Bartholomew, 11 people died. The hurricane damaged 95% of the buildings on the islands, and damage was estimated to be $3 billion. And reconstruction continues on both islands. According to the authorities, the rebuilding has taken longer because of delays by insurance companies. This has also affected the tourism industry. Time for another short break. Join us in a few moments.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. we keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Iran and Iraq have ditched the dollar in favor of alternative currencies, including the euro. Since the downfall of Saddam Hussein, both countries have strengthened their ties to boost trade. They now believe it's in their interest to remove the dollar. The head of the Iran-Iraq Chamber of Commerce also confirmed that the move will allow for businessmen to directly barter for goods. Chinese President Xi Jinping has announced $60 billion in financial support to African countries. He made the statement at the opening of the Beijing Summit on China-Africa Cooperation. That money will be used for aid, interest-free loans and concessional loans. President Xi says China is willing to cooperate with African countries to forge closer relations in industry, trade and infrastructure. Beijing will also expand imports from Africa.
History follows its own rules and logic, with similar fates in the past and a common mission. China and Africa have extended sympathy to and helped each other throughout all the years. Together, we have embarked on a distinctive path of win-win cooperation. Marching on this path, China has followed the principle of sincerity, real results, amity and good faith, and the principle of pursuing the greater good and shared interests. China has stood together with African countries. Together we have worked in unity and forged ahead.
2 Reuters journalists in Myanmar have been sentenced to 7 years in prison after being found guilty of breaking a law on state secrets. Outside the court, friends, family and diplomats expressed their disappointment at the verdict. Walone and Kai So-o were accused of breaching the Colonial Secrets Act when they were found with confidential documents. They say the documents were planted on them.
This is a dark moment and a deeply disappointing result. Anyone who's followed this trial will understand that by any impartial standard, by any fair standard, this trial established the innocence of Walone and Choso. It's disappointing for us at Reuters. It's heartbreaking for the friends and colleagues and family.
Now let's take a look at some other stories from around the world.
A man was shot by police in California, United States after he opened fire outside a concert by rapper Ice Cube. The unidentified man fired a semi-automatic handgun into the crowd. Allegedly, the man became irate after learning there were no tickets available. He was taken to hospital. Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte strongly insulted former United States President Barack Obama during a speech. Duterte took offense to Obama's criticism of human rights in his country. Speaking in Jerusalem, Israel, on Sunday, President Duterte said the matter should have been raised at the United Nations.
I cannot understand them, period. So, not the American citizen, but yung gobyerno nila. Kasi hindi ko malaman. Si Obama, in public, in a press briefing, knowing fully well that he was talking about me, who is a head of state, however small and humble may be, he castigated me about human rights. So, sinubrahan niya eh. If you have qualms, if you have complaints against me, go to the United Nations. File your complaint there and ask for a hearing. Hindi yan diretsuhin mo ako, you tell me in public that I am wrong, blah, 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 blah. Kaya sa nagalit ako, sabi ko, putang ina, Obama, you can go to hell.
Liverpool's historic Littlewoods Pool building caught fire on Sunday night. 9 fire crews had to battle the flames. The building dates back to 1938 and has been empty since 2003. So far, it's unclear what caused the fire. No casualties were reported. Local residents have, however, been advised to keep their windows closed.
We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Emiko Omolu, and thank you again for watching.
With developing events being presented